Welcome everyone. Going to do another live stream today. Quickly want to cover a couple of topics. I had two conversations this week that have um, kind of led me in the direction for this video. This is very informal. I just have a list of some talking points. I haven't done a bunch of research, but just want to give some kind of personal or anecdotal information and then talk about a couple things and then field any questions you may have. I am working on a couple of different kind of mini series to upload to YouTube, and this is going to be one of those topics. This is kind of a primer for that. So I was having lunch with a couple of buddies of mine earlier this week, and one of the friends of mine I actually used to work for. He's still a great friend of mine. Just after a couple of years of working together, it became apparent that the business was going a different direction than what I was willing or able to lead it. And so we parted ways. Like I said, we're still friends. But he was kind of giving me some insight into what was going on in the business, some things that were happening, and just catching up, basically. Get you a little more light. See if I can't wash myself out completely. So during the conversation, we were talking about something that he used to say to me all the time when we first got that business up off the ground and running, and that was do what only you can do and delegate everything else. And he also has quoted several times that a business should grow on purpose. So I want to frame this conversation in the concept that you are looking to start a gun business or a gunsmithing business. And I want to give you some information that I've learned after several years of doing this and owning my own business. Again, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dylan. I am the owner and sole gunsmith for Huntsville Guns LLC. I specialize in generalized gunsmithing. General gunsmithing basically means that I work on anything that walks through the door. I don't focus on one thing in particular. I'm not a stock maker. I'm not a barrel maker. I don't build custom bolt action rifles, but I am a gunsmith. If you have a broken firearm, you bring it to me and I will fix it. Let's talk about the why. I was doing some research for another video today. There is a video that I put out a couple months ago, several months ago now, that covers a specific topic. And in some research for a follow-on video, I ran into another gunsmith in my research. And then I did a little bit of background into him, looked up his FFL information, looked up what type of gunsmithing he does, looked up his publicly available credentials to determine kind of the credibility level of where this person is. And that led me to think, why do people get into gunsmithing? This guy did an appearance for a reporter, if you will, for a gun show, a big publicly listed gun show, and they did a kind of feature gunsmith debut for people that were going to be there. And in his own words, he grew up in a shop environment. His father was in the woodworking industry, and he grew up in that woodworking shop. And so tools and working on and diagnosing things kind of came to him naturally. He was a gun enthusiast. He eventually just kind of fell into gunsmithing, and that seems to be pretty common. People tend to either get into gunsmithing because out of necessity, like myself. I was working on my own firearms and had the formal training to start a gunsmithing business or to be a professional gunsmith. And then out of necessity, opened a business. That's just kind of how I stumbled across it. There was a need for the service. I had the skills and the training and the desire, and so I opened a shop. And then there are other people who, for a different necessity, i.e. they need work and it's what's available. And then that develops into a skill set and a set of training. And then you have the people who kind of luck into it, if you will. They purchase a business that's already started, or they want to get into a gun industry, and gunsmithing is directly corresponded to that. So instead of just being a retailer, they offer work as well. And so, for me personally, I got into gunsmithing kind of accidentally. Like I said, I needed employment, and then there was a need for my service in the area that I'm in, and I could fill that need. So I opened a business and got running, and that will lead me to my next point. Gunsmithing as a business is not something that you should kind of stumble into if you can help it. There are a lot of legal loopholes, or not loopholes, but legal hurdles that need to be overcome. Background check is kind of the least of them, but there's a lot of regulation and red tape around this industry, and having a plan before you jump into it is always advisable. If you do a Google search or a Chat GPT search or what have you for top 5 most important things when starting a business, licensing is going to be on those lists. Whatever professional license you need to have, or whatever, excuse me, legal documentation that you need to have to do that is important. It's going to be on the top of those lists. Excuse me. But additionally, a business plan is on that list. And gunsmithing can be a difficult business plan to write from experience. If you were starting a gunsmithing business and you needed to borrow money, i.e., take a business plan and market research and things of that nature to a lender in order to secure a loan or finance that business opening, a plan for a gunsmithing business is a pretty diverse, complex animal. It's very difficult to gauge market need and market determination, simply because if there's already a gunsmith in your area, the likelihood that they're going to divulge their business information, i.e., how many customers they see a month or a year, how much revenue stream they see, it's not something that's publicly available. You're not just going to go do a Google search and find top 5 profitable gunsmith businesses and what their tax returns look like. It's difficult to forecast. But additionally, the startup cost and the cost to operate that business for a period of time is kind of complex. It depends on what it is that you're going to be doing. Like I said, I focus on general gunsmithing. I fix anything that walks through the door if it's broken, or modify it if it legally can be modified, things of that nature. The problem you will run into when trying to predict and forecast that is, you have to have a very defined idea of what it is that you're going to be doing, what you will bill for that item or that task, how many of those you will be doing in a given period of time, 1 week, 3 weeks, 6 months, 2 years, whatever the case may be. So you can accurately predict how much money you will need to borrow. And then there's the cost of tooling and a building and utilities and insurance. It's one of those things they don't talk enough about in the gunsmithing industry. But here's my experience, and this is mine solely alone. I may have had the wrong approach to go about this. But the conversation I was having with a friend of mine about his business is, he opened the business. He had another business to use as a funding source for this said business. And so he already had a revenue stream that would kind of cover the bills in that intermediate period until the business would be established and providing its own income. And so he took some of that seed money from his previous business and leased a facility and bought material handling equipment and bought CNC equipment and manual equipment, different industry, but kind of parallels. A lot of the same concepts apply. Hand tools and computer and a telephone system and security system, all of these various facets that go into it. And then for the first year, he didn't turn a profit. There's a very real need for that item in that area. There's for that service specifically. The market can support the business being there, but it simply takes people time to find a business and to build a reputation and trust in a customer basis or customer base. And so his first year, he was not profitable. It cost him money to be in business for the first year. And then following years progressively got better and better and better. He's turning a profit. Now he's profitable, but then there's this pendulum effect when you're in the service industry where people have money and they're spending money, and then people are broke and they're not spending money. And so you try to balance your workflow and your cash flow to where even in the times of plenty, you're putting away surplus. So when you get to a time of need, you have that surplus to draw from to keep the business functional. And so he's in one of these times of need where he has employees and equipment and overhead, but he doesn't have the work coming in, and he's not performing the service to keep those employees busy and to keep the rent paid. And so that money from that surplus time flows over and helps balance that out. And so this is very difficult to forecast. If you've never run a business before, it's a lot more involved than I think most people realize. There are days when I am in the shop well past closing time doing bookkeeping or maintenance, fixing broken items. That was a big thing in that previous industry. Something's always going to break. If you have machine tools and equipment, the forklift is going to need tires. You got a boom cylinder leaking. You have a milling machine that has whatever issue is wrong with it, or a lathe that needs some additional tooling, or it needs a gearbox oil changed. And so that workflow, like I said, it can be very difficult to predict if you have no background in it. Gunsmithing is one of the few industries that I know of that still leans towards an apprenticeship. It's a lot less common than it used to be, but it is still pretty common for somebody to go be an apprentice under a licensed gunsmith before they open their own business. And so it can give you a good insight into what the day-to-day looks like. But ultimately, if you're turning handles on a lathe, threading barrels, you're probably also not doing the bookkeeping for the said business. And so you may not get a look at the kind of intimate behind the curtain details. So my experience has been one of growing on purpose. Like I said, this good friend of mine, I'm going to try to have him, maybe we'll sit down and do a live stream together. He has started and run several businesses in various industries, but his business mind is something that I've always appreciated. He can see through the trees, if you will. And my approach has been to grow on purpose at his suggestion. And so the building that I'm in, I own free and clear. There's no lien against it. I don't owe any money on it. The slab it sits on, the land it's on, the structure, the infrastructure in this building I own. All of the tools that you see, I own personally, outright. The business bought and paid for them. There is no note that needs to be made every month. And I choose to take this approach because in those times of need, that's one less thing that I need to attend to. I don't have to pay a note on some machine tools on a $25,000 or $30,000 CNC machine because I own it. If I don't use it this month and it doesn't earn me any money, it still doesn't cost me anything to sit where it is. And so that's been my approach, is to make sure that I'm not over leveraging myself and that I'm growing with the market demand. I bought this CNC machine because I started getting more and more calls about more complex work. I know how to run it. I have a background in CNC and CAD work. And I was getting more and more phone calls for optics cuts on slides and custom prototype parts and things of that nature. And then I bought the machine and I moved it in here, And realistically speaking, it hasn't paid for itself. That market space that I thought was there really wasn't as large as I thought it would be. But because I own the machine outright, it doesn't matter. It sure, it takes up space. It's holding a bunch of junk down right now, but it doesn't cost me anything to sit where it is. And so that's probably the biggest piece of advice I can give to somebody who is aspiring to be a professional gunsmith is don't over leverage yourself. Grow on purpose. If you have 10 people a month call you to thread barrels, does those 10 barrel threading jobs cover the cost of a lathe or a note on a lathe? Because if it doesn't, you shouldn't be buying a lathe. If you don't have the work to do that machine with, or to keep that machine busy or the skills to run it, you shouldn't be doing those things. It's the same approach that I take with Cerakote and firearms coatings. I get a couple of phone calls a week about Cerakote or parkerizing or bluing or whatever the case may be, but some type of firearms finish. And originally I did a lot of Cerakote work. It's fairly easy to set up for a compressor, appropriate spray booth, and an oven, and the ability to blast parts, and you're up and running. A couple $1,000 and you can be off to the races. And Cerakote will let anybody sign up for an account. You can order the material directly from them at an advantaged cost pretty easily. I did a bunch of Cerakote when I first opened the door because I was looking for any work that would walk through the door, anything to pay the bills, anything to earn income. I would take that job. And then I came to find that there's a lot of competition in that market. I'm an hour and 20 minutes from the north side of Houston. And between here and downtown Houston, there's probably 25 different companies that will Cerakote for you. What those companies don't tell you is that most of them don't Cerakote in-house. They take the work in, they catalog it, they put it in the books, and then they take it to somebody else to do the actual work. Well, I don't want to, this is going to sound arrogant, but I don't want to compete for 50 jobs that earn me $20 a job. I would much rather focus on the things that are much more profitable. In my experience, Cerakote is not one of those things. I'm more than happy to make a recommendation, have a really good relationship with a coder that is relatively close. I'm more than happy to point potential customers in their direction. Or if the customer prefers, I'll take the job and take it down to them and bring it back, put it back together and give it to them for an additional cost. It's a convenience thing. But there's a lot of things in this industry that are like that. There are some really large companies that specialize in doing really finite, into the minutia, detailed things. So LRI in the Dakotas is a perfect example. If you have a Remington 700 and you want to do an M16 style extractor cut, I can physically do that here in the shop. LRI does hundreds of them a month. It is way more advantageous pricing and workflow wise for you as the customer to just deal directly with them, or to use me as an intermediary, box it up, ship it, receive it when it comes back, do the transfer, than it is for me to tool up and spend $5,000 to do M16 extractor cuts. Not that it takes that much, but there's some fixtures and work holding. We're getting off topic, but that's another thing that lends to that saying, grow on purpose. If you have 100 people that want you to do an extractor cut, you should probably own the tooling and start doing extractor cuts. If you've got one person a month that calls you looking for an extractor cut, is it financially viable for you to buy the stuff and get set up and take your time to do that? Just things that you have to measure. And it's going to vary based on shop to shop, location to location, person to person, realistically. If you don't have the skill set required to dial in a Remington 700 bolt and to do the job, you definitely shouldn't be taking that job in. Had a customer stop by this morning to drop off a rifle Super nice guy, first time customer. We had a great conversation about suppressors and all the paperwork that's involved in that, threading barrels and why that is. And after talking for a little while, the guy's got a pretty good business mind. You can kind of get an impression about how somebody thinks pretty quickly. And it turns out that he is a consultant. He has 30 years in the oil and gas industry, and now he works as a consultant for other companies and other customers. They call him, they need his professional opinion. He boxes and catalogs that information, sells it to them in a package, turnkey, very simple to do. And so one of the things he said this morning that kind of caught me off guard, but also made perfect sense was don't be afraid to bill for your time. I touched on this a little bit in the previous video, I think last week's video that I uploaded, about why I charge what I charge to inspect and diagnose a firearm. If I charge you $45 to disassemble, go item by item and find the parts that are broken and effectively diagnose that and then repair that and put it back together, that $45 is a value adder, right? But part of that isn't you're paying $45, not just because I know how to take it apart and put it back together, but the experience that I have that says, hey, this extractor is damaged and needs to be replaced. You can watch a number of YouTube videos and learn how to take apart your AR-15. But after having worked on thousands and thousands and thousands of them, I've seen the majority of the issues and know what to look for. And so that's that time that you are billing for is knowledge-based, experience-based, skill-based, as much as it is an hour in the day. Friend, again, who came from the oil and gas industry and is now a consultant, and his daily rate to consult on a job is $3,000 a day. That particular individual is in a very specialized part of the maritime and oil and gas industry. Companies legally are required to have his experience on the payroll, and so he can justify that cost. The risk assumed is high enough that it quantifies that value. It's the same with gunsmithing. If you regularly, a bag of parts walks through my door and gets set on the bench and said, hey, I took this to a friend of mine and he took it apart and we don't know how to put it back together. Well, I do know how to put it back together, but that knowledge, you're paying for my time as much as you are for that knowledge base. So don't be afraid to bill for your time. It's the same with consultation. I get a lot of calls from gunsmiths around the country and customers, prospective customers, asking about a project they have in mind, something that they're working on. And it's not out of character or out of place to bill someone for your time. If I'm on the phone with you and we're discussing your AK-47 demilled parts kit rebuild, and I'm giving you professional advice and opinions, that is time that I'm not doing a job that's paying the bills. Electricity costs money. My phone bill costs money, and I have to pay those by working. And so if I'm on the phone with you, I'm not doing something on the lathe. That time needs to be accounted for. That's another one that was really hard for me to digest when I first opened the business. Customers are few and far between in this industry. It's very reputation based. If you have a good reputation, 5-star Google reviews, and you've been in business for a while, generally speaking, customers will find you versus having to go out and solicit those customers, advertising and things of that nature. If you do poor quality work and you treat your customers poorly, that will also have an effect on your business. And so that foundation of taking the jobs that you can reasonably do in a reasonable amount of time, and building a quality rapport with your customers and a quality reputation in your community is very important. I got a job recently Customer found me in a Google search. He said, "Oh, you have great reviews on Google." I dropped off a pistol at another gunsmith 3 years ago. He still hasn't even started that job. And then when I went to pick the parts up because I was tired of it, uh, the gun came back in a box of parts and it was missing parts that were there before, and there's damage to pieces. That's a really good way to lose a customer. And then when that customer goes to Facebook, Instagram, Google, wherever they're going to leave their review, that has exponential effects on your future business. Took the job, ordered the parts that were needed, made some parts for the project, put the pistol back together, test fired it, got the customer in, we test fired it, got it out the door. And I struggled with overbilling in that situation because my time is worth money and the parts are worth money, and those are pretty easy to delineate. But the fixing someone else's problem, that can be a difficult thing to bill for. You Okay, so I had the opportunity to hunt with a gentleman several times now. He is a machinist, and he is what I would call a master machinist. He works in a facility that is built solely around product failure. So if they're making a gate valve for a diverter that has X number of PSI, they build this valve, they test it until it fails. They do diagnostic testing and certifications on the product and say, hey, this is what failed. This is where your design was wrong. Here's the steps to correct it. And then here's the result. Very, very specialized, but it's not altogether different from what a gunsmith does. The difference would be if someone built that valve and took it to another testing facility and they couldn't figure out anything wrong. And then it failed, and then they bring it to him to figure out why it failed. Well, he's not going to charge nothing for telling them what was wrong originally. There's some convenience factor there, but additionally, the skill level. So knowing, like I said, building a reputation for quality and timeliness to me are of utmost importance, followed by skill. If you bring me an H&K USC to cut and thread, this barrel is $600 to replace, $550, $600 to replace this barrel. If you take this to your friend who doesn't own a lathe and he's going to cut it with a hacksaw and then use some mandrel that goes in the muzzle and doesn't fit the bore very well and tears up the end of a $600 barrel, odds are you're not going to be friends with that guy much longer, but also he doesn't have the money to replace it. Whereas as a gunsmith, I'll give you a real world example. I worked on a 1911 not long ago, and the customer, it's kind of a custom gun. The customer has a set of made for this firearm tritium night sights. They're a custom height, a very strange profile, and the lamp in the front sight is no longer working, so he wants to replace it. He brings it to me with a replacement lamp that he ordered.